Hi, I'm Mandy, and today I'm going to help you plan your route to the summit of Everest Base Camp. When I did my trek, I did it completely solo without a guide or a porter, which means I had to do all of my own research and plan my own route. And in the beginning, that was a very daunting task because the most I had ever done is one overnight, and that was on the Appalachian Trail in the state that I live in. So planning a one-night adventure was far different than planning what started out originally as a 10-day adventure. So you're going to have to figure out how to get yourself from the airport in Lukla, or even before that, how to get yourself from Kathmandu to Lukla to the summit. And if you're going on your own or even with a group that does not have a guide, you're going to have to figure it out all on your own. So I'm here to help you with that. Thankfully, thank goodness, there are a lot of guide companies and trekking companies that publish the routes that they take, and there are an endless, infinite number of maps of the trail available online. So once you get over the initial panic of, oh my gosh, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing or how am I going to do this, there are a lot of resources. And that is exactly how I got started. While I did go without a guide and without a porter, so I was completely independent, I did spend a significant period of time, probably a good 2 months at least, deciding whether or not I wanted to just be on the safe side and hire a guide and go through a trekking company and do a group tour as opposed to going by myself, because I was so afraid of messing up the route or getting lost or ending up not at a good safe location or like all of the million things that could possibly go wrong when you are a relatively petite female traveling by yourself in a foreign country that you've never been to before. So all of that fear aside, it was actually not as scary as I imagined it would be, and it didn't take a whole lot of more resources than what I was already used to in just doing my normal adventure weekend travels. If you have not ventured far away from home and you haven't planned weekend getaways, this might be a little more challenging, but hopefully if you're planning a trip to Nepal, unless you're already in Nepal, you've probably done some sort of travel and ideally you've planned it. With that, how I went about doing my research is I started off by considering my backup plan, which was to go with a trekking company. If you just go to Google and you just Google Everest Base Camp trekking companies or Everest Base Camp guide, about 6 million options will come up. There are so many. You won't have to search for them, like you'll be inundated with lots of different ones. What I did is I very simply just opened them and I just kind of read through them one by one. And most trekking companies will have a map somewhere on their webpage, and they'll have words and it will say like day 1, and then it will give you a breakdown of the day. Generally the route you're going to take, what you can expect to see, if there's waterfalls, if there's monasteries, any points of interest, right? They're really trying to sell you on it. So they're going to give you everything. And then they're going to tell you what village you're going to stay in. Sometimes they will get specific and give you the name of the tea house. And that was one of the things that made me a little bit weary, is like I wanted to avoid all the tea houses that the big group went to because I wanted a nice quiet experience. Since the more popular option is to go with a trekking company or with a guide and a group, it's really nearly impossible to avoid that. But I did see that the same names came up over and over and over again, and then went out of my way to try to avoid those ones. If you want to be with a lot of people and you want to try to make friends and get to know some new people along this trail, or at least to have other people to talk to, go for one of the busier ones, right? And you'll see the same tea houses come up over and over and over again. They're the ones that have the reputation of just really partnering with the local guides. So you will see the same ones over and over again. Just because you only see a couple names of tea houses pop up, please don't let that scare you into thinking there aren't a lot of tea houses. There are a lot of tea houses, and they're not only in the villages that are popular for the trekkers to stop overnight, but there's a lot of tea houses just along the route that aren't popular with the groups to stop and stay out overnight, because you're still going to need to eat. And where do you eat along the way is at the tea houses. So there are lots and lots and lots and lots of options. So please don't be worried about options for tea houses along the route. You just stay wherever it is that you think is best for you to stay, and you'll have something. So I started researching the different companies. I did send an email to several different companies to just ask for an estimate, to tell them this is how many days I was thinking about going. I wanted to start on this date and roughly end on this date, and they will put together everything for you. They can even arrange your hotel in Kathmandu before and after for those couple days before your trek starts and the couple days before you fly off to wherever it is that you're going next. They will help with your airfare. They can take care of, they're just travel agents, right? So if the trekking companies are more than just guides, like they are the travel agents that will handle everything. If you need help with your visas or anything passport related, like they're happy to help because they will charge you as can be expected, right? They will help you for a fee, and you'll be charged for their services, but they're always happy to help. So if you're brand new, if you haven't done a lot of traveling, if you want to go out there and learn and you want someone to walk you through the whole process, I'm not in any way discouraging anyone from using a trekking company. They're very popular. Again, most people go through a trekking company and go with a group tour. I was just feeling exceptionally brave, but you don't see a lot of solo trekkers. You don't even see a lot of trekkers that might be in a small group that don't have a guide. It's even if there are people by themselves, almost all of them have a guide right by their side. It just wasn't what I wanted for my journey. As you start to research the different companies, it's always a good idea to get a good sense of what they're charging so that you can kind of get a good sense of the pricing in case you change your mind. If something happens and at the last minute you decide, I'm just not fully prepared, or I'm scared to go on my own, or I'm not sure that I can handle this, or I don't have the experience, I really want to have a guide with me, or you know what, at the last minute as I was trying, okay, by the last minute I mean like a month before, because I packed so early. I was so excited that I pretty much started packing about 4 months prior. But the last minute I was torn between, should I take my sleeping bag, should I not, and I was so scared about being overly cold that my trip was going to be miserable, that the difference between having a porter for me and not having a porter was my sleeping bag. And I have a very tiny down sleeping bag, and it isn't the warmest. It's maybe 2 seasons, but I shiver at 63 degrees. Like, I am perfect. I want it to be 74, like perfect room temperature all year long. And at 63, I start shivering. And this is in Fahrenheit. So 63 degrees Fahrenheit, I start shivering. And I'm okay to be hot. Like, I don't mind being hot. I don't want the sun to be on me, but I'm okay in with warmer weather up to like 90, 95, and I'm still okay. But I've learned this about myself, that at 63 degrees, I start shivering and I'm miserable. Like, I will be grumpy and cranky, and I will not be the most pleasant if I don't have enough layers to bring my temperature up to where it doesn't feel like it's 63 degrees anymore. But at the last minute, I almost broke down and hired a trekking company to go with them as a group because I was needing a porter. And the only way to get a porter is to go through at least a guide that partners with a porter. But a lot of times the porters and the guides are hired by trekking companies. And at the last minute, I did get really scared that I was going to need a porter, and I couldn't get my pack to the weight that I needed it to be. I don't weigh much over 100 pounds. And my pack originally, like I packed it and repacked it so many times, and I weighed every single, even like the little shampoos, like I weighed every single little item so that if my pack was too heavy, I could pick the items that I needed or that I thought I needed the least and remove them and know how much weight I would be removing. But I got to a point where every single thing was essential, or at least to me for my first really long trek. And there was nothing else that I could take out. But I thought I was going to need a sleeping bag, and I almost abandoned all of my preparation, all of my planning to go solo to get a porter. So it's always good to do research both ways, and then you'll be comfortable, and you'll have already reached out to a couple companies that if you decide to use a company, you already have built that rapport with them, and you can just send them an email and say, hey, like, I know it's last minute, but can you add me onto your trek? Even if it starts in a couple of days, I'm sure they will, again, be happy to take your money, and joining them should not be a problem. So my suggestion is to start off by researching trekking companies. Find a couple that you like, that the pricing is okay with you, that you could afford if you were going to use them, even if you end up not using them. It's always good to have, again, to build that relationship. And then if you get there and you need anything, at least you have a point of contact of someone that you've spoken to before that you can possibly just write to and say like, hey, I'm needing help with this. Whatever it is that you need, and just see if you can get in touch with them. And then send them a little money, like find a way to give them money, or see if there's a hotel, a tea house that you can leave a tip for them. And they're always having their guides and their porters go in and out of all these tea houses, that if you leave money for them at one of the tea houses, they will get it. Like they will send someone to get that money. And I did do that. So if you need that, it's great to have those relationships. And you can always ask, like if you're nervous about going by yourself, you can send a couple emails out to a couple guides or a couple trekking companies and just say like, hey, if I leave you a tip, or if you have a certain dollar amount that you think you'd be willing to accept, like, could I call you? Like, could I have your WhatsApp number, or however you'd like to do it, and to say like, could I call you in the event of an emergency? Okay. I definitely did that, and I definitely used it a couple times. So that's always great. So have a couple trekking companies or guides that advertise online that you like their itineraries, you like them as people, as companies, they sound good. Write to them, communicate with them, have a way to contact them, know the pricing. And again, they will give you a map, and they will show you on the map what villages they stay at every single night. So if it's a 10-day or a 12-day or 14-day or whatever it is, like you'll know where they're staying each night. That's how I started with my prep, is I looked at all the different maps, and I looked at lots. I looked at a lot. And after seeing a couple, it becomes very clear that most of the companies, they stop in the same villages. So there's regular villages that it just seems like everyone goes to. Now, to mention, there are a lot of villages that aren't on any of the maps. If someone were to put every single little village on the map would be, it would be a gigantic map. So usually just on all the maps that I was seeing, and even after coming back and having snapped a photo of some of the smaller villages that I went through to see if I could find any map with them on it, it's just not a thing. So I almost wish I was back in like Christopher Columbus's, day, and I could go through and like map everything out and scale everything and have a real actual map where you can have all the little villages. Even one of the guides that I ended up hiring to be like my emergency contact, when I needed it and I said, hey, I'm too ill, I can't make it to the next village that's 9 miles away that we planned. Can you help me find something in between? Because I'm scared that if I leave this tea house, there's not going to be a tea house for me to stop at. Like I need to break my route down. And he did not know. He's like, I'm looking at the same map you are, and like, I don't know anything in between. Like these big ones are really all they know, which to me is a little bit crazy, because I feel like to be a guide or a guide company, like you would have had to have done the trail so many times. But it's just, I'm thinking people just pass through the smaller villages, and they're not well recorded. And again, these are just the maps that you'd find online, and they're not like trekking maps or hiking maps or topographical maps. They're just, here's all the points. So they're helpful to a point, but just know there are a lot of small villages in between all of the different recorded points on the map. So please don't worry, you will not get trapped without a tea house. Sometimes in the national parks you do go for hours and hours in between tea houses, but it isn't a thing that there just aren't any villages. Like you will find them. Okay, and there are some that aren't on the map. So just know that as you're walking, you can't, I had downloaded those maps onto my phone as just an image. And then I was thinking that as you pass through one village, that because the next village on the map was my village for the night, that would be the next village I came across. And then I hit the second village and third village and the fourth village. And I was 7 or 8 villages through and I still hadn't come to mind. And it made me panic at first because where was mine? So the maps are just a highlight. They're just a highlight. So just know that in advance, the maps are just a highlight. Okay, so after I thoroughly did research on numerous different companies and I reached out to several of them and I kind of built that relationship up with a couple different ones, and I got their phone numbers and I downloaded their maps, and I was completely confident of which ones I would use if I went that route. I then started to figure out what distances I wanted to go each day. And that's really how I planned my trip. It's not based on, I didn't necessarily just pick one of the itineraries that the guide companies used and just did what they did. Again, because I didn't want to be stuck with crowds of people and to go exactly where they went. But I wanted to try to get an even hiking day in each day. So instead of having one day where you do 12 miles and then the next day you do 2, I would rather do 7 miles and 7 miles. And I wanted to be pretty equal each day because that's just what I was more comfortable with. The longest I've hiked was maybe about 5.5, maybe 6.5 miles each day. And then that was in and back. For my one overnight that I had done previously on the Appalachian Trail in Maryland. It was about 5.5 miles in, I camped overnight, and then I did the 5.5 miles back to my car. So 5.5 miles was pretty much, or maybe 6.5 miles was the most I've ever done per day, and then 2 days in a row. With that, I really wanted to know that it was going to be a distance I could do. So my goal was to not do much more than 6 or 6.5 miles per day, because I knew that I'd be able to do that. I didn't know how many days. I didn't know if I could do that for 6 days or 7 days or 8 days, but I knew at least that I could do it for 2. And I felt like once I got there and once I did 2, I could do 2 more. And then I could do 2 more and I would be good. I was very determined. But knowing your ability is also, it's also great. So all just things to consider. Okay, so how do you find the distance between? Because it's not going to be on the maps. I just did basic Google search. Like I just said, from point to point, how far is it? And then if it ended up being too far, I would try to look on the maps that they had to see what one was maybe in between. And I did it like that. And I wasn't able to get a perfect relative even number, just because, again, I didn't realize before I did my trek that there were villages in between the villages marked. I thought that everything marked was all the villages and that there was nothing else. And so if from one point on the map to the next point on the map was 10 miles, I thought that my only option was to do 10 miles. And that ended up not being the case. There were 80 tea houses in between in those 10 miles, in between 6 or 7 different villages, but I did not know that. So that is how I went about planning my route. So again, I wish I would have had a little bit more facts, but I just didn't find any research, and I researched for months and months, and I could not find anything on how people ended up planning the route that they did. So my route did change. I did make a plan and I put it on a spreadsheet and I printed it out and I stuck it in my pack and I took a photo of it with my phone, and I made sure it was in several different locations so that I didn't lose it anywhere, and that I would always have a backup. First, I'll go over what my original itinerary looked like, and then if you've watched part 1 and part 2 of my trek, my plans did change. I ended up getting really sick with acute mountain sickness, and I could not go the distance that I had originally planned. Like, I did not feel well enough for it. And again, I did learn into the trek several days in. I started to pick up on the fact that there are lots of little villages in between. So I did change my plans. I'll give you my original plan first, and then what my actual itinerary looked like. My original trek was supposed to be 10 days, 9 nights, and it started off the first night being in Finalizing, and then the second and third nights were in Namche Bazaar. And you might learn from your research. I did not. In my research, it did not uncover this, but the trek to Namche Bazaar is intense. It is straight uphill and it is really, really tough. Like, if you do it in one day, like, bless you. I did it in 2 ultimately, but it is a big day. After Namche, so Namche was supposed to be 2 nights, and that is because every trekking company spent 2 nights in Namche, and it's for the altitude. I chose to do that as well, not knowing I had other options. Then night 4 was in Tangboche. Night 5 and 6 was in Dingboche. Night 7 was Lobouche. Night 8 and 9 were in Gorkshep, and night 10 was back in Lukla. Again, that changed. Pretty much on the very first day of my trek, I started to not feel well. I was sick pretty much immediately, and I decided to break my days up. So I didn't stay at any one location for 2 nights. The 2 nights I just broke, and I stayed somewhere along, like somewhere in between the tea house that I was leaving and my destination tea house. So this is my actual trek. On night 1, I stayed in Finalizing. Night 2, I stayed in Monjo. Night 3, I stayed in Namche Bazaar. Night 4 was Tangboche. Night 5 was Pangboche. And night 6 was Dingboche. Night 7 was Loche. And the 8th day, I reached the summit. Again, this actual itinerary worked really well for me. And even if I wasn't sick, I think if I would have known that I had the option, I would have broken it up. Me, I don't like to hang around a place. Like, I think I would have been very restless and really bored if I would have got to say Namche Bazaar and then stayed there for 2 days. And normally, when you get to a city or a village that you're going to stay at for 2 days, you spend part of one of the day doing like a hike, and then you come back. But to me, the trail was long enough for me, as only having done one overnight that was a total of maybe 12 miles. The whole journey to the summit was longer than I knew for sure that I could handle. So I didn't want to add a whole bunch of extra miles, and I just wanted to do what it was going to take to get from Lukla to the summit, and I didn't want to risk adding even 1 extra mile onto that journey. So mine worked really well. I really enjoyed having that, like, breaking up my second night into 2, to where instead of staying 2 nights at one location, it was 2 separate locations. I got to see a different village each night, and they're villages that if you just pass through them, you might not stop to appreciate the things that they have. Like, for example, in Manjo, there was a monastery that I really enjoyed going to, and I didn't go to any other monasteries on the entire trek, and I went to the Manjo one simply because it was immediately next door. It was like right around the corner from the tea house that I ended up staying at. But if I had just passed straight through Manjo on my way to Namche Bazaar, I likely would not have gone to the monastery. If you haven't seen the monastery video, I'll put it in the description below, but it was a ton of fun and it was my very first one, so it's very special to me. Okay, so that is how I planned my itinerary, and that's how I figured out where to go and where to stay each night and the route I was gonna take. I would suggest having not only a paper copy and a digital copy of the basic map. I didn't download an app because I thought that the trail would be so well marked that there was no way that you wouldn't ever question if you were going the right way. But that wasn't always the case, and thankfully there was always someone nearby, even if it was a local that did not speak any English, where they can at least like literally like point you in the right, like, yes, it's this way, and it's usually two ways, right? Like, it'll either go left or it'll go right, or it'll go up or it'll go down. But just ask if you're just not sure, like, ask several people just to make sure, and don't ask another trekker. Like, the last thing you want to do is follow someone that thinks they know they're going the right way and like they're not going the right way. So ask a porter, ask a guide. Be careful if you ask a guide, because then they will follow you and they will be like, hire me, and then it will take you several miles to get them to stop following you. So just be careful who you ask. If you see someone with a strap around their head and a massive pile of stuff on their back, they are the perfect person to ask, and they're probably not going to speak English, but they are going to know what direction to go. Okay, so that is how I planned my route and my trek, how I figured out how much distance I was going to cover each day and in what villages I was going to stay.